Hey Optimancers, Chris here. As I mentioned when I did my recent Sorlock vid, I was planning to redo or revisit some old classics that I would build differently today than I did when I originally released them. Now, the Bladesinger that I released a couple of years ago, using the old Sword Coast Adventures Guide rules for Bladesinger, not the new Tash's rules. So this one in particular actually really needs an update. So we will be doing a Bladesinger build today, and this will use the concepts for building a Bladesinger that I discussed in my last video. The link to that video is up above. Now, just before we get into this build, I want to preview a little bit because I talked about Bladesingers a lot in my last video, and one thing I mentioned was from levels 2 through level 6, weapon attacks and Bladesingers mix really nicely because you can go into combat and deliver, pretty decent damage, and we can mix that up with spellcasting. The challenge, however, is that after level 6, Shadowblade is not delivering damage at a scaling level as fast as the power of our other spells are scaling. And when we have spells like Tensor's Transformation that very obviously fulfill the idea of a melee character, the problem is that when we're talking about delivering damage, Tensor's Transformation actually isn't significantly better than just upcasting Shadowblade, and I showed the math on that. But it goes further than that. One of the things that was mentioned to me after that last video was that, a lot of players they like the concept of Bladesinger. They like the idea of, we sometimes call this a Gish build that combines weapon attacks with magic. And Bladesinger can do that. And if we give up doing weapon attacks, then we're not really fulfilling that concept anymore. And if we go past level 6 and then we give up on Shadowblade and we give up on Tensor's Transformation, then maybe we're not getting our character concept as we wanted it anymore. Now, there's two things I would want to mention in response to that. The first is we'll never give up on weapon attacks. Bladesingers do have weapon attacks built in, just as any other wizard has cantrips built in. So another wizard is still going to be casting Firebolt at high levels. They just do it a lot less. Same thing with the Bladesinger, likely going to go into melee and deliver our attack and our cantrip a lot less than we did at earlier levels. But the other thing is that if we want to go into melee and we want to be super effective, we do actually have options. It just so happens those options aren't Shadowblade and they aren't Tensor's Transformation. And if we multiclass our Bladesinger, we actually become worse at going into melee. And I'm going to show you why that is. Eventually, at level 17, actually a Bladesinger can be as good at melee as anyone in your group, maybe better, and definitely better than any Bladesinger that does multiclassing. But the great thing is that, number one, we're going to maintain our concept. If we cast Tensor's Transformation, we give up the concept of mixing weapon attacks with spellcasting, because you can't cast spells when you cast Tensor's Transformation. The spells we cast are not going to prevent us casting other spells. They're going to make us effective in melee, but also they're not our only options. They're just going to be some options we have. So if we want to go into melee, we have that option. If we don't want to go into melee, we have other fantastic options that have scaled as wizards do, so we're still getting the advantage of being the most powerful class in the game, single class where we have the most powerful spells in the party, plus we can go into melee. I'll show you how it works with this build. Now that said, this isn't necessarily simple because what happens is, although we are going to be good at delivering melee attacks at level 2 and we'll be good at delivering melee attacks at level 17, our tactics change. At one point we'll be using Shadowblade. At another point we'll be using different spells. And finally at a final point we'll be using a spell that's incredibly complex and versatile. And so we just have so many options, never mind the choice of whether to go into melee or deliver a spell at range. So in the end, it's just sort of complicated. And that is our build today, sort of complicated. Now, I mentioned a number of different races in my last video that are good on a Bladesinger. One of those was the Goblin, and that is what this character is going to be. So here's the reasons we want to play Goblin. So dark vision, of course, is always useful. Although they're small, goblins have a 30-foot movement speed. They get Fury of the Small, When you damage a creature with an attack or a spell, and the creature's size is larger than yours, which will be most creatures, you can cause the attack or spell to deal extra damage to the creature. The extra damage equals your level. Once you use this trait, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Really nice, a little bit of extra damage. This isn't the reason we're playing Goblin, but we should absolutely use this before any rest. The main reason we're playing a Goblin is for nimble escape. We can take the disengage or hide action as a bonus action. This allows us, first, we can go into melee, and then we can use the disengage action as a bonus action, deliver our attacks, get out, no opportunity attacks. This also can spur creatures to be more likely to take booming blade damage because they want to follow you. The other thing is the hide action. This is actually a great way to protect our concentration. If we cast, say a really good concentration spell, and it's really important we maintain concentration, then we use our bonus action to hide. That is going to help protect us from taking additional damage. Now the setup for our ability scores, we want a +1 to our dexterity and a +2 to our intelligence. We will start our ability scores with an 8 strength, 15 dexterity, 15 constitution, 15 intelligence, 8 wisdom, and 8 charisma. That's with point buy. Once we apply our racial modifiers, intelligence is 17 and dexterity is 16. So we have our intelligence at an odd number, our constitution at an odd number. By the time this character is complete, we won't have any odd scores anymore. But this is pretty much as good as we can get. You do not have to have a constitution of 15. You could get by with a 14 on this character if you didn't want to dump all 3 other stats. So if for some reason you want to have a 10 wisdom or 10 charisma, you can do that easily enough. I've picked up a background that is going to start me off with the stealth skill. We want the stealth skill on this character. If we're going to make use of bonus action hide actions, we want to have a good stealth score. So I'm starting out with 2 levels here. Obviously, level 1 for Bladesinger is no different than any other wizard. Here's level 1 for you. So you are going to take a light crossbow. You're going to shoot that whenever you're not casting spells. And then when you are casting spells, it's probably the sleep spell. You're going to use the sleep spell, super effective at level 1. And that's level 1 for a wizard. And it's probably the same regardless of the type of wizard you play. But at level 2, we become a Bladesinger. All wizards get Arcane Recovery right from level 1. It's going to give you more spell slots. And it's pretty simple. Basically, 1/2 your level rounded up worth of spell slot levels recovered when you take a short rest. You can do this once per long rest. So it just means more spells to cast. We'll be getting Training in War and Song. This is going to give us proficiency in light armor. I suggest you get studded leather armor. That is not expensive, and wear it all the time. Now, I will be taking mage armor with this build, and I would still recommend casting mage armor, maybe not at 2nd level though. But at higher levels, 1 spell slot is not a huge deal, and it's +1 armor class. But you should still wear studded leather armor underneath, because what if you happen to get caught when your mage armor isn't up, or you get dispelled, or whatever, you might as well have that added protection underneath. In regards to weapon proficiency, we can choose 1 melee weapon. I've taken the short sword here. Another option is the rapier. Now, I mentioned in my previous video, I think short sword is the better option because you have the option of 2-weapon fighting. I should mention here, though, if we are using the Goblin bonus action disengage, then 2-weapon fighting can't be done. So there's reason why you might want a rapier here. But, what if we don't care about disengaging? At least with the short sword, we have that option of 2-weapon fighting. And the thing is that short sword, it's 1 less point of damage on average than a rapier. It's really not a big deal. So either one is fine here, but I have taken short sword. And the iconic feature of the Bladesinger, of course, is Blade Song. So we can only use this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, and we only regain those uses after a long rest. That means right now we can use this twice per long rest. It lasts a minute each time, so I would not expect to be using Blade Song in every combat. However, when we do use Blade Song, it is a bonus action to activate. We always want to activate it on our first round of combat. It gives us an armor class bonus equal to our intelligence modifier. Right now that's a +3. Our walking speed increases by 10 feet, so that takes us to a 40-foot movement speed. We have advantage on dexterity, acrobatics checks, and we gain a bonus to constitution saving throws we make to maintain our concentration on spells. And this is also equal to our intelligence modifier. Now, we're not proficient in constitution saving throws, but we do have a +2 constitution modifier, +3 intelligence modifier. That gives us +5 bonus to concentration saves. right at level 2. Now our armor class, like I said, at level 2, I'm not sure I'd be spending a spell slot on mage armor, so that would be 2 from the studded leather, 3 from our dexterity, that brings us to 15. Then we'd add our intelligence modifier, that brings us to an 18 base armor class when we're blade singing. 18 is pretty solid, and we can get it up to 23 if we cast the shield spell. Speaking of which, these are the spells I would recommend starting out with. Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade. If you're going to be going into melee as a wizard, I think you need these cantrips. I would be using them all the time at this level because we have a very limited number of spell slots, so we can't cast spells in every fight. So we're going to be going in, doing Booming Blade, doing Green Flame Blade, and likely using a bonus action to disengage. Like I said, another option, pick up a second short sword, and then do 2-weapon fighting. We should always have a ranged cantrip option, and the one I'm picking here is Mind Sliver. At this point, I'd say most of the time I just use a light crossbow in combat. It's going to have just as good a chance to hit as an attack cantrip and will deliver more damage. The first level spells I'm recommending selecting: Absorb Elements, Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic, Find Familiar, Longstrider, Mage Armor, Shield, and Sleep. Sleep is going to be probably the primary spell I'm casting at first and second level. But Shield, Mage Armor, and Longstrider are spells that I'm going to be casting more at later levels. At this point, I would really only cast Shield if you were going to get hit with a big hit, and Shield is going to negate that. We actually have more preparations than we need here, so I've got spells prepared that I probably wouldn't be using spell slots to cast. Our routine at second level, pretty simple. Sleep is the big thing we can do. So we are going to be casting Sleep spell. We've got 3 first level castings, then we can get another first level casting through a short rest and arcane recovery. So that's kind of the big thing we're going to do in combat. Doesn't use our concentration. Probably round 1 we would cast Sleep. The rest of the time we're going to make attacks with weapons. We could either shoot our light crossbow, or we could go into melee and attack with a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. If we think we can proc that secondary damage, then we will do more damage in melee, though I will say that in neither case are we delivering a lot of damage. If we're making a strictly melee character, they will be delivering more damage. Same thing with a strictly ranged character. We'll be delivering more damage than us. So Sleep is the main contribution we're making, and then we're supplementing it with more minor weapon attacks. I should add that most of our attacks should be made with advantage. We have 2 ways to get advantage. The first is we have a bonus action, hide action, that we can use. The second is we have a familiar that can do the help action. So we have 2 different ways to grant ourselves advantage. We only have 1 attack. So again, most attacks should be made with advantage at this level. So with most wizards at this point, I'd be looking to do something to boost my concentration saves. Here, I need to boost my concentration saves less for 2 reasons. The first is, if I'm blade singing, I've already protected concentration saves through adding intelligence to those saving throws. If I am not blade singing, I can use my bonus action to protect those concentration saving throws even more effectively by hiding as a bonus action. So we have a bit of a luxury here to increase our intelligence, and that's what we're going to do, but we're going to do it with a half feat because we're sitting on a 17 intelligence. Now once again, if you can take setting specific material here, Gift of Alacrity is really strong, Silvery Barbs is pretty strong, but if we don't have access to those spells, then I would recommend the Bless spell. This is normally not available to wizards, and it's going to improve our offense and the offense of our party members. It is also going to improve our concentration saves as well as any other saving throw, as well as the saving throws of the other people we bless. Now by level 3, we're getting into some really great concentration spells. Spells like Web are suddenly available to us. So we don't always want to cast Bless. It really depends on the battlefield and whether we can get the most out of those spells and whether we can afford those resources, because in a longer adventuring day you may not be able to do those spells in every combat. Bless is nice here because we'll be able to cast it once for free, and even after that it's only a first level spell slot, and it tends to have a reasonable impact. Enough that if you're not casting anything else in a combat, it's well worth your first round to set that up. So over 2 levels, we'll be adding 4 second level spells to our spellbook. I'm recommending Mirror Image. This is a very strong option. If you want to take hits and turn them into misses, Mirror Image is a great way to do that. Shadow Blade has a reasonably sized level window where it's going to be a good spell for us, especially if we're in dim light or darkness. If we're not in dim light or darkness, we might actually do more damage if we do something like lay down a web or something that's going to give advantage to allies' weapons attacks as well as our own. But if we're in dim light or darkness, Shadow Blade does reasonable damage if we're using a spell just for delivering damage to enemies. Now, once we get our extra attack feature at level 6, what we want to do with Shadow Blade is we want to actually have the Shadow Blade in one hand and our short sword in another. And then we're going to go into melee. We're going to attack once with the Shadow Blade, then once with the short sword doing a booming blade attack. Then we can use two-weapon fighting and we can attack with the Shadow Blade again. And if we're in dim light or darkness, second level spell slot, we're going to be doing about 22 points of damage per round. That's not bad damage. And if we expend a higher level spell slot, we can increase that, but you need to be thinking about what kind of spells you're giving up by using those higher level spell slots. We may seriously want to consider casting Web instead of using Shadow Blade though, because Web of course is going to give all our allies advantage to hit, as well as give our enemies disadvantage to do their hits. As well, we prevent them from moving. So there's all kinds of things that Web is doing to aid ourselves and our allies. So what you would do if you're using Web is you lay it down on round 1, and then on round 2 you can go in and you can start making your advantage weapon attacks. Tasha's Mind Whip is probably not something I'd be casting a lot at these low levels, but I want it on my spell list because later on I think it is a reasonable use of a spell when we're not doing something super powerful. Like if we're concentrating on a different spell, then Tasha's Mind Whip is a decent option. Delivers 3d6 psychic damage. It is an intelligence saving throw. That's the saving throw we like to target the most. And a creature that's hit can take reactions, and on their turn they can either move or attack. They can't do both. By 4th level, I do think it is worth casting Mage Armor. We have 4 first level spells, 2 second level spells. We're going to recover 2 more first level spells after a short rest. 1 spell slot on Mage Armor for a +1 armor class. I think at this point is worth it. We are also going to pick up a cantrip at 4th level, and what I'm going to recommend picking up here is Shocking Grasp. Probably not a cantrip I'm going to use at 4th level, but we'll be using it later on, and I'll be going over that later. So at this point, the Bladesinger is getting a little more complicated. We have to choose. Are we going to do Web? Are we going to do a Shadow Blade? Are we going to set up a mirror image? A lot of options are available to us in addition to going in and just doing a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. We'll probably still mix it up, though I'd say the most powerful thing we can do is probably the Web spell when it's appropriate. So at level 6, this is probably where, when it comes to using weapons, we're at our best. We've just gotten our new extra attack feature. You can attack twice instead of once whenever you take the attack action on your turn. Moreover, you can cast one of your cantrips in place of one of those attacks. So if we're concentrating on a different spell, it's basically you go in, you can do your regular weapon attack, and then you do like a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. The other option is that if we're going to use Shadow Blade, then we go in, we do a Shadow Blade attack, then a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade attack, and then we do an offhand weapon, which is again the Shadow Blade. So we can deliver 2 Shadow Blade attacks and then an attack cantrip. So those are our options at this level. No matter what we do, including with Shadow Blade, we're never going to be delivering as much damage as just a straight out weapon user is likely to do. Our advantage, of course, is that we can mix that up with spellcasting. So if we use Shadow Blade, just be aware that you're probably not going to quite do the same amount of damage as somebody who's optimized in just straight out weapon use, but we're still delivering a significant amount of damage. The other option, of course, is to do some of the big spells that wizards can do and be really effective with those, and then we supplement it with some weapon attacks, and that's perfectly reasonable, although our damage is going to be significantly less than theirs, because we're contributing in such significant other ways. Overall, we're still being very effective. So when we go into melee and we make an extra attack, so we're going to do our weapon attack and then we're going to do a cantrip, we have to choose which cantrip we're going to use. Booming Blade is kind of the go-to. It's not what I would use all the time, but if I don't know what else to use, Booming Blade's probably the one. And basically, we're going to go in, it's going to deliver an extra d8 thunder damage to the primary target, And if they move again on their next turn, they're going to take an additional 2d8 thunder damage. So ideally, what we want to try to do is maybe use our bonus action disengage, and that might convince them to move towards us, thus getting that secondary damage. That's our first option. Our second option is Green Flame Blade. Now, Green Flame Blade, first off, the damage type is a little less reliable, but if we are attacking somebody and they have another enemy right beside them, I'd always do Green Flame Blade over Booming Blade unless I expect the enemy to be resistant or immune to fire. The reason for that is because we automatically are getting the secondary damage then. So with Booming Blade, we have a chance to get secondary damage, but with Green Flame Blade, as long as that setup is there, we can be 100% certain to get that secondary damage. So when that's the case, then Green Flame Blade is the better option. The third option for us is to do Shocking Grasp. Now, Shocking Grasp will do the least amount of damage of these three options. So if damage is our goal, then Shocking Grasp isn't the play. But the advantage of Shocking Grasp is if we hit them with it, we do deliver some damage, and they can't take a reaction again till the beginning of their next turn. So you need to look at initiative order too, because if they go right after you, it's not all that great. But if they just went and then we go in and attack them, we can remove their reactions. Now, one advantage of that is we wouldn't have to use a bonus action to disengage. That's maybe not such a big deal. I mean, we have that bonus action available. Where we would want to do this is for enemies that have things like Counterspell, or if enemies have something like Absorb Elements, and we want to shut that down, we can do that by delivering a Shocking Grasp, and that might set up an ally to cast a spell without getting Counterspell, that kind of thing. So this is the one I would use the least often. But when we do use it, it can be massively impactful. Finally, our extra attack cantrip could be Mind Sliver. Now this will do the least damage of any of those cantrip options. The advantage here is if we want to set up an ally to do a spell, then what we're going to do is we do a Mind Sliver, they make an intelligence save, which is usually a weak save, and then their next saving throw has a minus d4, so we can set up that ally to do a save or suck kind of effect. Now, the other advantage of Mind Sliver is we can do it in combination with a melee attack, or we can do it in combination with, say, a light crossbow attack. So either way, Mind Sliver can work. Our spell preparations at this level: Mage Armor, Shield, Mirror Image, Shadow Blade, Tasha's Mind Whip, Web, and then our third level spells, I would recommend picking up Counterspell, Fear, Fly, and Slow, and preparing all of them. Counterspell is hopefully not a spell we need to use very often at lower levels, but when we're facing enemy spellcasters, Counterspell can be a lifesaver. Excellent use of your reaction. In fact, when you get hit with an attack, I highly recommend, if you think any of the enemies can cast spells, look at how much damage you are going to take and just make a decision. Is it worth a first level spell to cast Shield, or do we want to save our reaction in case we need Counterspell? So if you see an enemy casting a spell, you can cast Counterspell using your reaction, and the spell is automatically countered, so it doesn't go off at all. Now, if the spell they're casting is 4th level or higher, then we do need to make an ability check. That ability check is an intelligence check, and the DC of that will be 10 plus the spell level. So if it's a 4th level spell, we need to make a 14. We have a plus 4 intelligence, so we have a better than 50-50 chance of that working. Well, if they're casting, say, a 9th level spell, we have significantly less. Though remember, there are ways to boost ability checks. If there's bards in the party and they give you inspiration, for example, these can be good ways to make Counterspell more reliable. Fear is an excellent control spell. If you're going into a group of enemies and you don't believe that they are immune to the frightened condition, then we can do a 30-foot cone, and because we have bonus action disengage, we're often going into melee range anyways, we can place that 30-foot cone easier than a lot of wizards will be able to do. Anyone who fails to save is frightened, and they must use their action to take the dash action and move away from us. And they do not get another save. They keep on dashing and running until they are in a position where they don't have line of sight to us. And even then, they get another saving throw, but the condition does not automatically end. None of those creatures can move closer to us willingly. So any creature that fails to save is basically out of the fight. Now, Hypnotic Pattern is another really good third level spell, but Hypnotic Pattern, one of the disadvantages of it is that an enemy can shake another enemy out of a Hypnotic Pattern using an action. So let's say you have 6 enemies and 3 of them fail their saves. If the other 3 use their actions, the Hypnotic Pattern is over. Still useful, took a whole turn away from them, but Fear doesn't have that situation. If creatures fail their save against a Fear spell, there is no way for them to get out of it unless they break our concentration. Fly is a spell that I think most wizards should probably take because sometimes you need to fly. It's, of course, useful for utility. It can be incredibly useful in combat, and it upcasts incredibly well. If we cast it with a 4th level slot, we can target 2 creatures, 5th level slot, 3 creatures. Eventually, we could potentially fly the entire party. It does use our concentration, but fly can be an absolutely essential thing in your party. And if you can't place a fear spell, or you're worried about creatures that might have immunities, slow's the way to go. Slow allows you to target up to 6 creatures within a 40-foot cube, but there's no friendly fire. So you do the 40-foot cube, which is quite big, and you just pick which enemies you want it to work against. So spells like Fear, when you can get them off and hit the right number of creatures, can take creatures right out of the fight. Slow doesn't do that. But the debuff here is significant. They're getting a penalty to their armor class, to their dexterity saving throws, to their movement speed. If they have multi-attack, they basically lose that. And if they cast spells, they basically have a 50% chance that that spell isn't going to take effect on the turn they cast it, and they're going to have to wait till their next turn. They may be dead before that ever happens. So the impact here is still really significant. The big disadvantage of slow is they do get a saving throw every round. So at level 6, this is a really nice level for Bladesingers, but it is a complex level because we have such a variety of options. Shadowblade and going into combat, perfectly reasonable if delivering damage is what we want to do. But in terms of other control spells, spells like Fear, spells like Slow, spells like Web, these have a massive impact on combat. So in a lot of cases, we might want to cast those on round 1 and then start delivering melee attacks afterwards. And of course, we can't use Shadowblade then, so we're doing less damage. But we've had such a massive impact on the combat already that we are still being very effective and being an excellent team member. So you really have to look at what you're fighting. Do you think they're immune to frightened? Can we get enough of them in a cone? If not, what about web? How effective is restrain going to be? Do we think that they're immune to restrained? If all those things are of questionable value, then what about a slow spell? Can we get enough of them in a slow spell to be worthwhile? But maybe it's just one big enemy. If it's one big enemy, maybe delivering damage is the best thing we can do. Then we might want to consider just doing Shadowblade and going into combat and delivering damage. So we do really need to look at the battlefield. We need to look at what enemies we have, what kind of resistances or immunities do we think those enemies are likely to have. Pay attention. Those are often revealed during combat as well. And then we deliver our resources based on what we're facing. So Bladesinger has so many options that are fantastic, and you really simplify it into being ineffective if you just do Shadowblade and run into combat all the time, or you always cast Web, because again, it's not always the right move. If you are a tactical player, Bladesinger is a great subclass for you. You're really going to enjoy dipping into the various options based on your situation. Now, if we want to deliver damage, how good are we? Well, the best we can do is if we're in dim light or darkness and we use a 3rd level slot on Shadowblade and we use our 3 rounds of setup, because on round 1 we have to Blade Song, that uses our bonus action. Round 2 we cast the Shadowblade, that uses our bonus action. Then round 3 we want to do 2-weapon fighting, and that is also going to use our bonus action. So we are not delivering full damage until the 3rd round of combat. At that point, it becomes 37 points of damage. The baseline I normally go by is about 16.5 at this level. We're doing as much damage as a character that is totally focused on weapon use and doing damage. So that becomes a pretty solid option for us, in addition to the other solid options we have from being a wizard. So 6th level is a nice level for Bladesingers because we have that versatility and we're so good no matter what we select. Now, there will be other moments where melee is really good for us. I'm going to be going over those because there are some spells we can cast, but the delivery of Shadow Blade damage doesn't keep up. So we can scale our Shadow Blade by casting it with higher level spells, but if we want to keep up with other weapon users, it's just not going to work. But this is a nice moment where we have that great flexibility between our options. Moving on to 8th level, we get another ability score increase. Warcaster doubles up on our concentration protection. It's also going to help us on the times we're not blade singing to protect our concentration. It also allows us to hold weapons in both hands and still cast spells. This is going to help if we're doing combinations like with Shadow Blade and Short Swords. And finally, when opportunity attacks are provoked from us, we can cast a spell in place of making that opportunity attack with a weapon. The spell I would cast, in most cases, would be Booming Blade. It requires no resources, and if that creature is moving from us, it's basically automatic secondary damage. So let's say, for example, we are going to cast the Fear spell. So we go into melee, we cast the Fear spell, creatures move away from us on their turn. That provokes attacks of opportunity because they have to use the dash action, they can't use the disengage action. We could then use Booming Blade. We would do the weapon damage, we would do the direct thunder damage, and we would do full secondary damage because of the Warcaster feat. So this will also improve our damage. The spells we want to be adding are Confusion, Dimension Door, Autoluke's Resilient Sphere, and Polymorph. Right away I will be using Dimension Door and Polymorph as prepared spells. I won't be preparing Confusion or Autoluke's Resilient Sphere. I'll be preparing Confusion a little later though. One thing I like about Confusion is that unlike things like Hypnotic Pattern and Fear, we don't have to worry about condition immunities with Confusion. It doesn't matter if they're immune to the charm condition. So if you are casting a spell at a group of enemies and you're worried about immunities, so you choose either Slow or Confusion, these are the factors. So Slow covers a much bigger area and has no friendly fire. So there is a really good chance that you're going to get more creatures with a Slow than you will with Confusion. The nice thing about Confusion, though, is that there's no limit to the number of creatures that can be affected. With Slow, there is. But the big difference is the effect, because with Slow, it's a debuff. We're basically taking away multi-attack. If they didn't have multi-attack, that has no effect. We're reducing their speed, and if they cast a spell, there's basically a 50-50 chance that it's going to go off, and they have a reduction to armor class. With Confusion, the effect is far more severe. You can see the chart here. Basically, there is an 80% chance they will not be able to control their action on their turn. So if we want a more devastating effect, Confusion is a more devastating effect than Slow. Slow is an effective debuff, but Confusion is a devastating debuff. We're going to grab Dimension Door. This is a 500-foot teleport. You can bring along an ally. Now, we have an issue here that we're small-sized. That's unfortunate. It means we can only bring someone along if they are also small-sized or smaller. So this does limit Dimension Door a bit for us. It does also mean later on, when Scatter's available, we'll want it. Furthermore, if you are able to get setting-specific spells, take a look at Vortex Warp as a second-level spell. If I'm a small-sized caster and that's available, I am 100% taking that. Autoluke's Resilient Sphere I'm going to take. I will not be preparing it. I do really like it as a contingency spell, so I want it in my spell book so I can prepare it in off times and then use it with contingency. It basically can surround you or another creature with a impenetrable wall of force. If it is unwilling, it gets a dexterity saving throw. But as I said, this isn't something I'm preparing. It's something that I will be using with contingency. Generally, what I would do is you set a trigger with contingency that if you reach a certain threshold in hit points, then the spell goes off. So then you can have an Autoluke's Resilient Sphere go off, protect you, prevent you from going down, give you a chance to heal or set up new spells, or maybe just get out of there. Polymorph, probably the best spell in the game for this level. When we cast Polymorph on an ally, we can turn them into a giant ape and they get 150 plus hit points. So, an ally is about to go down, you cast it, suddenly they're a giant ape. Giant apes are actually really tough. They do a lot of damage with their hits, they have multi-attack. And basically, you keep it on them until the battle is over, and then they can be healed up back in their original form. Another way we can use polymorph is we can cast it on an enemy. They get a wisdom saving throw. If they fail that saving throw, we basically take them out of the fight. I'm not a huge fan of spells where they get a saving throw, and if they make it, nothing happens. But this is an effective one. If that's the kind of spell you want to cast, this is a pretty good option. And because we have that flexibility in the ways this can be used, it becomes doubly effective. I think it doesn't scale quite as well as a lot of other spells do because Giant Ape is really about the best we can get. There's T-Rex after that, but T-Rex is arguably no better than the Giant Ape. And then after that, we don't really have any options for polymorphing. And so it just never gets any better. So I do not necessarily think polymorph is the spell I want on my preparation list at high levels, but for the next, 5 levels, I think it's worth having on our list. Now, our strategy at level 8 hasn't changed significantly. I do find that Shadowblade is beginning to lose steam when we get above level 6, but it's still okay. So if I wanted to go into melee, I could still use Shadowblade, and I'd be all right. And I also think you could use a 3rd level slot with Shadowblade here, and it's not nearly as big a deal as when those were your highest level slots. The main things here, Dimension Door add a lot of utility, and Polymorph adds a lot of combat versatility. Now, I wouldn't be using Polymorph on myself. Always use Polymorph on somebody else because you automatically have your statistics replaced with those of the creature. That means we could lose any of our bonuses to make saving throws, and then we're still concentrating. So it's really hard to maintain concentration when you don't have, the proficiency or your Warcaster or Bladesong or anything like that. Then Polymorph just likely won't hold. So it's much better on another creature. That takes us to level 10, and at level 10 we're going to get Song of Defense. This is a Bladesong feature, and you can direct your magic to absorb damage while your Bladesong is active. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to expand one spell slot and reduce that damage to you by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot's level. So Song of Defense, when would we use this? First thing to note is it uses your reaction, so you cannot use it in the same round that you're going to be using a shield spell. Also, once we use this or the shield spell, then we can't use counterspell. So you do have to make your decisions carefully. This still does have value though. So let's say, for example, we're in combat and we're hit and we take 40 points of damage. And let's say the shield spell isn't going to work. Maybe we got hit by a critical, or maybe it's not an attack. Maybe we got hit with a breath weapon or something, and maybe we can't use absorb elements. So now we have Song of Defense to reduce that damage. Do we want to expend a spell slot? It really depends. But let's say, for example, we took 40 points of damage, and then we were to, say, use Song of Defense, 3rd level slot, and reduce that damage by 15. Well, if we're concentrating on a spell, this could have a massive impact. Because if we take 40 points of damage, now we have to make a DC 20 concentration save to maintain concentration. That's a difficult save, even with advantage. That's not an easy save to make. But if we were to, say, reduce it by 15 points to 25, well, now that concentration save is a DC 12. So 12 is very achievable. Massive difference between the two. And we're expending a 3rd level slot. That's expensive, but probably worth it. Okay, so 5th level spells. Here's what I'm recommending. First up, Wall of Force. Wall of Force is probably the most powerful 5th level spell in the game, so that's why you want it. It is pretty versatile. You can make a flat surface of 10 by 10 foot panels, and you get 10 of those panels. You can place them however you want. They don't have to be placed on the ground. You can place them in the middle of the air as well. Or you can create a hemispherical dome or a sphere with a radius of up to 10 feet. Now, depending on the size of the creature, you may or may not be able to enclose a creature within that. But any creature that you can enclose in that, and I would say certainly any creature of large size or smaller should be easy. If it's a huge size creature, probably. If it's a gargantuan creature, it's going to be iffy. You're going to have to check with your DM. Measurements for creatures aren't exact, but essentially a radius of up to 10 feet is 20 feet across. There is a good chance that a gargantuan creature might intersect with some of the wall, and if it does, then it gets shunted so it doesn't. But if we have creatures, like let's say you got a huge dragon flying at you, and your DM's okay with it, if the DM says that that creature is no more than 20 feet in any direction, You could do a dome around that creature. Doesn't matter if it has legendary resistance. It's out of the fight. You can deal with everything else. Wall of Force is fantastic. I intend to do a full video on Wall of Force at some point because the tactics go further than that. The next spell I'm recommending is Transmute Rock. Now, if we cast Transmute Rock, we select a 40-foot cube of earth, and it should be the ground. And I don't do it on ceilings. And generally speaking, it's unlikely we're going to have mud already, so we're usually not doing mud to rock, we're doing rock to mud. And the creatures within have their speed effectively quartered. So, you have a creature with a speed of like 40, even if they dash, they can move like 4 squares. They potentially can't even get out of the area. So this is all without a saving throw, by the way. Now, they do get a saving throw at the end of their turn. If they fail that saving throw, they become restrained as well. And then they have to use their action. So they can't dash. They have to use their action to break the restrain condition. Never mind, we're getting advantage on attacks against them. But the really nice thing here is it doesn't matter if they make their saving throw. If they make their saving throw, they still have that terrible speed reduction. If we have any form of force movement, this is the perfect time to use it because, they dash, maybe they get 2 or 3 squares, then we push them right back to the center, and we can often make it so that creatures can't attack at all. And this, like with Wall of Force, we're getting to the level where we're talking about creatures that have legendary resistances, and I hear all the time about burning legendary resistances. Don't try to burn through 3 legendary resistances. What you want to do are cast spells where it doesn't matter if they make their save or it doesn't provide any save at all. So Wall of Force, Transmute Rock, they both have that. The nice thing about Transmute Rock, no concentration, lasts until dispelled. So we don't have to worry about duration, we don't have to worry about concentration, and we can concentrate on other spells at the same time. Disadvantage of Transmute Rock is basically you need a rock floor. If it's not a rock floor and they're not standing on it, then it's not going to work. So in the cases where Transmute Rock does work, this is kind of my go-to because it really, really shuts down enemies. And like I said, it doesn't matter if they have magic resistance, it doesn't matter if they have legendary saves, not going to save them. Now, preparation slots are something we need to consider. We're using them all up. So this is a good time for us to look at a ritual because wizards don't need to prepare their ritual spells. Rary's Telepathic Bond creates a telepathic communication for 8 creatures, can be your entire party. That can be very useful. But you know what? If you want to go back and select a ritual from an earlier level, like a Phantom Steed or a Water Breathing, those are good too. One way or the other, I think a ritual is a good pick here. So at level 10, I'm recommending we continue preparing Shadow Blade. The damage for Shadow Blade at this point, I'm not sure it's all that great considering we're 10th level. It's basically the same damage that we were doing at 6th level. So we can get over 40 points of damage per round, but that does require that 3-round setup, and it assumes dim light or darkness. So there's a lot of factors in play. If doing single target damage is really what we want to focus on, we want to go into melee, we want to be delivering single target damage, we want to be really good at it, I would, again, recommend don't go to Tensor's Transformation. But if that's what we want to do, then we could go with Animate Objects. Animate Objects delivers a lot of single target damage, and if we were to cast it at 5th level and go into melee and then combine it with our attack action, we can do about 50 points of damage per round. That's a fair bit more. Tensor's Transformation gives us about 44, and it's using a higher level slot. In fact, if we use Animate Objects with the same level slot as Tensor's Transformation, we're doing about 59 points of damage per round. But the thing about Animate Objects is that they are not delivering magical damage. That means that a lot of creatures might be resistant to that damage. That reduces the damage quite a bit. So combined with our attack action, then we're looking at about 32 points of damage per round. If we upcast it to 6th level, about 36 points of damage per round. So that is less than we can do with the Tensor's Transformation. But the thing about Animate Objects is when we cast it and then we go into melee, we can still cast spells. So we can still cast the shield spell or counter spell or whatever spell we need to cast. With Tensors, we can't. So although we're doing about 8 points less if the creature has resistance. I mean, if the creature doesn't have resistance, then it delivers a lot more damage. But even if the creature has resistance, like I said, about 8 points of damage per round, but we can still cast spells. I think that's a worthy trade. So I would recommend animate objects if that's what you want to do. I'm not recommending it on this build. I haven't put it on this build, but I did want to talk about it if that's what you want to do. And we're finishing off with Bigby's Hand. Bigby's Hand, excellent spell, largely because it's very, very versatile. It does use your concentration, lasts only a minute. The most simple thing we can do with it is we can hit a creature with it. So we use our bonus action on our turn, and we can try to hit it with the fist. If it hits, it takes 48 force damage. And that's, I would say, the least potent of all the things we can do with Bigby's Hand. But if you don't know what else to do that's useful, it's better than nothing. Forceful Hand will push a creature within 5 feet of it in a direction you choose, and the amount it is pushed is 5 times our intelligence modifier. So at this point, that's 20 feet of pushing. And we make the hand strength check, and it's contested by the strength athletics check of the target. Normally, if you shove a target, they can choose whether to use athletics or acrobatics. We're not going to give them that choice. They have to use strength athletics. And just like with Transmute Rock, and just like with Wall of Force, we don't care if they have legendary resistance. We're not giving them a saving throw. The option I use the most is Grasping Hand. So the hand attempts to grapple a huge or smaller creature within 5 feet of it. So it can't be used against gargantuan creatures. Use the hand strength score to resolve the grapple, and the hand strength score, basically it has a +8 modifier. If the target is medium or smaller, you have advantage on the check. While the hand is grappling the target, you can use a bonus action to have the hand crush it. When you do so, the target takes a bludgeoning damage equal to 2d6 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. The big thing here is the grapple, because grapple reduces a creature's speed to 0. So you have, let's say you have a huge sized dragon and it's coming towards you. If you grapple it, you can often just take it out of the fight, because if it's out of range of its breath weapon, we can just kill it with arrows. Legendary actions still aren't really going to help it. It can attack the hand, but the hand is not easy to kill. It's got an AC of 20, so it's not easy to hit, and it has our hit point maximum, so it's not easy to kill. So this dragon is attacking a spell effect, and we're just killing it with arrows, and no party member is taking any damage whatsoever. Now we need to talk about movement, because can you move after you've grappled a creature with the Bigby's Hand? Well, Bigby's Hand, you can move the effect, but it doesn't have its own movement. As far as I'm concerned, with the grapple rules, you have to use your own movement in order to pull a grappled creature. But different DMs are going to rule that different ways, so maybe you can move the Bigby's Hand after grappling a creature. If you can, this spell is just broken. But even if you can't, it's very useful to do. And again, we don't care about their saving throws. We don't care if they have magic resistance. We don't care if they have legendary resistance. Another thing I want to mention is if we reduce a creature's speed to 0 that's flying, then it falls. And if it falls, it takes damage and falls prone. So that's another thing we can do with Bigby's Hand, is we can grapple creatures that are in the sky and then have them fall to the ground. The final use is the interposing hand. So the hand interposes itself between you and a creature that you select. And if that creature has a 26 strength or less, it can't move towards you. And there's no check on that. It just cannot move towards you. And no saving throw again. So again, creatures with legendary resistances or magic resistance, we just have so many options to deal with that. Never worry about burning legendary resistances. Just cast spells that don't care about them. Now, the interposing hand, we're not controlling the movement of the creature beyond the fact that it can't move towards us. So it can be less effective than Grasping Hand, but more reliable. And it is giving you half cover. So the thing I love about Bigby's Hand is that we just have so many options. We can just deliver damage with it. This is what we do when we don't know what else to do with it. Or we can use the Forceful Hand to push. We can use the Grasping Hand to grapple. We can use the Interposing Hand to block movement. Bigby's Hand to me is all about controlling the movement of the enemies. We can actually just upcast this to deliver more damage. The scaling isn't too bad on that, but I just don't think this is a great damage spell. It is really about controlling enemies, and I think it is very good for that. To begin with, though, I am going to prepare Transmute Rock and Wall of Force. Bigby's Hand I will prepare later. I should also say that 10th level is the last level where I'm going to worry about preparing Shadow Blade. At level 12, we're going to get an ability score improvement, and now we're going to get our intelligence up to 20. So this helps us in so many ways. Obviously, it increases our spell DC, it increases our chance to hit with spell attacks, but it's also increasing our armor class, and our concentration saves, and very soon it will increase our melee damage as well. Okay, so we're going to be picking 4 6th level spells. First one we're going to pick is Contingency. I discussed that before with Autoluke's Resilient Sphere, so we're going to set up a contingency with Autoluke's Resilient Sphere. This is going to be done outside of gameplay or like in downtime because this has a duration of 10 days. So I wouldn't prepare contingency. What I would do is wait if there's a couple days in between adventuring, then your character is going to prepare a contingency, Autoluke's Resilient Sphere, set up the contingency. Like I said, you want to set a threshold for hit points. It might be, I don't know, 30 points, 40 points, something like that. You get below that amount, and then the Autoluke's Resilient Sphere goes around you, and it will help protect you. Second spell I'm taking is Magic Jar. I do not have time to even explain how Magic Jar works. If you look in my video catalog, though, I do have a video where I discuss how Magic Jar works. It's a long video because this is a complicated spell. There's also all kinds of shenanigans you can do with it. I'm not going to prepare it, but I like it in my spell book just in case I'm going to need it. Scatter I'm preparing, though. Scatter is a mass teleport spell. You can teleport 5 creatures to any spaces you can see within 120 feet. Allows you to completely reset a battlefield. Here's when I use Scatter. Once a battle starts going wrong, and maybe we have allies that are grappled and restrained, maybe we have bad effects that allies are in, enemies aren't in them. Basically, the enemies have the tactical advantage because of positioning and because of effects on the battlefield. That's when we want to use Scatter, and we turn that on its head. Because we can teleport all our allies and our enemies up to 5 creatures. And if we teleport enemies, they get a saving throw, but allies, of course, we don't have to worry about saving throws. So usually we target the allies that are in trouble, and we're going to target the enemies with the rest of our selections. And if they make their save, then we can't push them, of course. But if they fail their save, then we can put them in the bad situations that the allies used to be in. It can really turn a battle around. Scatter isn't my go-to spell like on round 1 or anything. It is something I'm going to save and use when we're in trouble. And Mass Suggestion, this is one of the best 6th level spells in the game. Basically, we're going to take 12 creatures. We're going to give them all saving throws. If they fail, we give them a suggestion, and they think that suggestion is a great idea for 24 hours, and there's no concentration. So we suggest to the creatures that are fighting us that it's time to pack it up. We're obviously too powerful. It's time for them to just surrender and save their lives. Great suggestion. We just won the combat. Didn't even have to use a concentration. And no, I'm not recommending you take Tensor's Transformation. I discussed this in detail in the last video. In fact, I spend more time talking about how bad this spell is than anything else in the entire video. So I'm not going to go into it again, except to tell you it's bad. So at level 12, let's just go over our preparation list because we have a lot more spells than we can prepare. So I have got, of course, my cantrips are Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, Mind Sliver, Shocking Grasp, and I've added Mage Hand. Now, for prepared spells, remember, of course, we don't need to prepare our rituals. But prepared spells, we're going to have Absorb Elements, Mage Armor, and Shield with our first level spells. With our second level spells, Tasha's Mind Whip and Web. For our third level spells, Counterspell, Fear, Fly, and Slow. For fourth level spells, Confusion, Dimension Door, and Polymorph. Polymorph could probably go at some point, but I think at 12 it's still okay. For our 5th level spells, we have Bigby's Hand, Transmute Rock, and Wall of Force prepared, and 6th level spells, Mass Suggestion and Scatter. It's just a massive quantity of effective spells we can cast. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of a rant here. Now I have said for years and years that wizards are the most powerful class in the game, and I do believe that, but I do have a word of warning because I've gained some experience as a DM playing for players, playing high-level characters, and lots of different players. And one thing I notice is that not everyone does well with Wizard. And there's a pattern. I can see it 100% of the time. If there is a player playing a high-level Wizard and they're the ones who, you describe the initial encounter, you describe the creatures they're facing, you describe the environment, other players are taking their turns. They're laying down spell effects. They're concentrating on things. They're moving things. They're doing specific things to enemies. And the players that can't pay attention to that or don't pay attention to that do poorly with wizards. And the reason they do poorly with wizards is because there are a big list of options for wizard, and none of them are failsafe. They all have particular weaknesses to them. And that's the advantage of having all these options, is that, the DM described the creatures and they described them as ghostly. Well, I probably shouldn't be casting web. Or the DM really emphasized this one creature, and that's probably the one with legendary resistance. I should probably avoid saving throws. So when it comes to these kinds of things, if we pay attention, then we have a much better chance of picking the right spell for the situation. And if we don't, then it's completely random. And what happens is we cast spells and they just don't work. And then we're disappointed with our wizard because, boy, these were supposed to be so powerful. And I ended up being kind of useless in that fight. And that's usually what's happened, because as a DM, I actually have a reason for describing the encounter to you beyond just trying to create mood. I am giving you hints. I'm telling you about the creatures you're facing. And if you don't pay attention to that, then you're going to be missing out on the hints I'm giving you that are vital for a wizard. Now, if you're a fighter, that's not necessarily a problem. Shoot your crossbow, boom, 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 and you're going to do a lot of damage, and that's it, right? You can just even say, which creature is the one that's damaged? That one? Oh, boom, boom, boom. Oh, I killed it. Great. Easy to do, and you'll be effective. But with a wizard, if you're not paying attention, you're going to find that you can fail a lot of the time, and it's going to be kind of a disappointing experience. Now, if you're still having fun and you still want to play a wizard, I always say, play what's fun for you, but just be aware of the expectations, right? If you have expectations that you're going to be super powerful as a wizard, including a Bladesinger, but you have trouble paying attention to those other things, you're not going to do as well. And I've just seen this over and over again now. And I just think it's worthy to mention it to you, even though if you're the person who zones out, maybe you didn't listen to this rant anyways. Now, level 14, let's talk about this a little bit. There's actually a couple different things to talk about. First thing to talk about is Song of Victory. You can now add your intelligence modifier to the damage of your melee weapon attacks while your blade song is active. I do think this feature gets overrated. The thing is this is coming on really late in the game, 14th level. Now, if we had gotten this anywhere near 6th level, then it would have been a really big deal. But at 14th level, we're a 14th level wizard capable of casting 7th level spells. Am I still making melee weapon attacks? Absolutely. I'm still going into melee once in a while, but again, these are kind of filling in gaps, right? So it tends not to be the primary thing I do. So yeah, it makes that fill in thing a little bit better. It's like adding to cantrip damage, but it will make a bigger effect at later levels because there is more we can do later to go into melee and make better use of this. Specifically at level 17, I'll talk about how Song of Victory plays in. Okay, so we're going to get 4 7th level spells. First I'll be taking Teleport. Teleport is just fantastic utility, of course, because you can teleport people all over the place, like hundreds of miles away. And you can teleport the entire party. And because this is just an action, we can actually do it in the middle of combat. So if we had like a bad situation and we needed to get out, teleport could be used for that as well. I don't know if I'd bother preparing teleport though. Just as utility, I think it's really great to have on your spell list. Now, Simulacrum is the most powerful 7th level spell in the game. It is one of the most powerful spells in the game, period. And it's broken. So Simulacrum, it's one of those spells that I have to be honest, I am playing a 14th level wizard in a campaign right now, and I didn't take Simulacrum because I like the campaign. And if I take Simulacrum and I use it to its effectiveness, the campaign's over because I break it with Simulacrum. You can create a duplicate of yourself, or you can create a duplicate of somebody else. They don't even have to be willing. And then the creature that is created has the same features as the original, except they can't gain spell slots and they have half as many hit points. And they follow your orders. And this doesn't use concentration, and it lasts forever. However, this is an optimization channel. So, I think I have to mention Simulacrum, and I am definitely going to recommend you put it on your list. But just be careful about casting it, right? If you are casting Simulacrum, you might just break your campaign. We're going to take Force Cage. Now, Force Cage is a really, really powerful spell that I absolutely do use. This creates a prison up to 20 feet cube. But it can also be a 10-foot cube, and it is non-concentration. It's very similar to Wall of Force, actually, but non-concentration, lasts an hour. Now, a 20-foot cube is actually bigger area than a 20-foot sphere. So in theory, Force Cage should also be able to hold a bigger creature. And like I said, without concentration. Just really, really massively powerful. And again, if we're facing creatures that have legendary resistances, Force Cage is a good way to just take them out of the fight. Now, creatures can always teleport out of these things. So they can teleport out of Wall of Force, they can teleport out of Force Cage. However, teleporting out of Force Cage is difficult. If they want to teleport out of Force Cage, then they do have to make a Charisma saving throw. And if they make it, then they can teleport. If they don't, the teleport fails. So here's where legendary resistances could come into play, but only if the creature is capable of teleportation. The final 7th level spell I'm recommending is Draconic Transformation. So Draconic Transformation does 3 different things. The first is that you get blind sight with a radius of 30 feet. So if you have party members that, use like magical darkness or something, then this can be really good combined with that. It also gives us a breath weapon. We can do it as a bonus action for 68 force damage, reliable damage, save for half. And, we can do a fair bit of damage actually with that. 68 is not bad at all. And we get a 60-foot fly speed. So we get 3 different things here. Now, I will say that if you are a player that really wants to take your Bladesinger into melee, I think Draconic Transformation is a really solid option at this point. That bonus action breath, like I said, 68 force damage, dex save for half. That's going to be about 20 points of damage average per creature hit. So it depends how many creatures you hit, but 20 points of damage per creature. Then with our weapon attacks, we're doing not a whole lot, but still about 19 points of damage around. So like if we hit 2 creatures with this, and I can't always guarantee that you'll hit 2 creatures, but if we hit 2 creatures with this, that's 59 points of damage per round. Remember, Tensor's Transformation does about 44 points of damage per round. So this would be more damage in that case, though we are splitting up that damage. But even if we only hit 1 creature, that's still 39 DPR. That isn't bad. And there's always the possibility we'll hit more than 2 creatures. And so it goes up really fast, 59 to 79 to 99, right? So this is pretty good. In addition, we're getting great maneuverability with this because we have flight and it's a good speed, 60 feet, just same as the fly spell. And that blind sight might also be useful. So if I'm looking for a spell that allows my Bladesinger to continue to go into melee, Draconic Transformation is a spell I want to have. I'm not sure this is as powerful as the other 7th level options we have, but if that's what I want to do with my Bladesinger, this is going to be the best option you've got, and it won't stay that way. Once we get to 9th level spells, then Draconic Transformation is not the best spell to be going into melee with, but at this level, I think it's as good or better than anything else we could do. That brings us to level 16. Level 16, we're going to get another ability score improvement. And here we'll take a feat, and we're going to take Resilient Constitution. This will get our Constitution up to 16. So we're going to get a nice boost to our hit points. And we're going to finally get our proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Now, we've been relying on Bladesong to largely push our con saves when we're making concentration saves. And Warcaster helps with that as well. But the great thing about Resilient Constitution is it's not just about our concentration saves, it's about all Constitution saves. And Constitution saves are reasonably common, so this is really good to have. So let's talk about 8th level spells. The first one I'm going to recommend is Clone. So Clone is a spell you could use to make your entire party immortal, right? You can create a clone for a party member. If they die, they pop into the clone. Their soul moves to the clone, which is a copy of the original form. So yeah, if you clone the entire party, basically none of you can die. Now, when you pop into your clone, it doesn't have your equipment, but it does have all your features. So you will still need to go and likely reclaim your equipment. But yeah, clone, very useful spell. Not something I'd prepare. Something you'd be casting outside of adventuring. Now, Demiplane, you can absolutely use in adventuring. You can absolutely even use it in combat. There's some shenanigans you can do with Demiplane. But you know what? It's also just a useful utility spell. You throw all your crap in there, and then you can access it anywhere. But yeah, if you want to do shenanigans, you can do things like Glyphs of Warning in there. You can fill it up with undead and unleash it on your enemies. But I mean, just the regular uses of Demiplane, I think, are good enough. I'm going to take Mind Blank. This is not a spell I'll be casting regularly. It gives me immunity to psychic damage, any effect that would sense emotions or read thoughts, divination spells, and immunity to the charmed condition. And it lasts for 24 hours and doesn't use concentration. And we don't have to cast on ourselves. We could cast on somebody else as well. And when do we want to use Mind Blank? Well, there's very specific situations. Like, for example, if I was going into a Mind Flayer lair, then I want Mind Blank, right? Or if I'm going anywhere where I expect that charm is a big problem, Mind Blank is good. Mind Blank might also be good to do on the party member who is weak in will saves. So when that party member you don't want to have charmed and turned against you, you could do a Mind Blank to give them immunity. But in most cases, this isn't my go-to 8th level spell. In most cases, my go-to 8th level spell is Maze. Maze you cast on a creature, once again, like with all spells that I seem to be taking at these higher levels, I don't like creatures being able to make their saving throws. Legendary resistances, they're a bummer, so let's not give creatures saving throws. Maze is one of those spells that doesn't give creatures a saving throw. You cast it, they're basically banished like the banish spell, except without a saving throw. On their turn, they can make a DC 20 intelligence check, not saving throw, to try to return. If they have less than a 10 intelligence, there is a 0% chance of success. Even if they have a 20 intelligence, they have like a 30% chance of success. So yeah, Maze is just really, really effective. Does use your concentration. So it is a concentration spell. But yeah, you just pop a creature out of existence. No saving throw. That's it. Yeah, Maze, super effective. Now I'm actually going to stop this build at level 17. I need to talk about some things at level 17. So this is one level more. And then you have levels 18, 19, and 20. You could take Wizard with those, absolutely. I don't think that's a bad way to go. Or there's some other ways you could go. And I'll talk about those in a little bit. But first, what I need to talk about, of course, are 9th level spells. So Wish is generally recognized as the most powerful spell in the game. I'm not going to go over everything Wish can do because it's so versatile, that would be impossible. But it is obviously a spell I want on my spell list. So I'm going to grab Wish first and foremost. But I want to talk more about the other spell I'm going to choose. So I've seen builds online that take 11 levels of Wizard and then they take a bunch of multi-classing to try to make Tensor's Transformation decent. And I'm telling you, skip all that multi-classing, just go Wizard, don't cast Tensors, cast Shape Change instead. Shape Change is going to deliver more damage to your enemies through melee attacks if that's what you want to do with your Bladesinger than Tensors ever will. It's also going to boost your defense more. It's also going to give you a chance to use your spells. This is a Planetar. Planetars do 5d8 additional radiant damage whenever they hit with any weapon. And they normally use a greatsword with multi-attack. Now, greatswords don't mix with Bladesong, but we don't have to use the greatsword because we're using Shape Change. We keep all our initial abilities, so our proficiency with short sword, we get to keep it. Our extra attack with cantrips, we get to keep those too. But we get to mix it up with angelic weapons. So we could use 2-weapon fighting. So if we did, then what we would have is d6 plus 5 from Song of Victory, plus 5d8 for our offhand attack. That's 30.5 damage. Then our main attack is a d6 plus 8 because we're adding Song of Victory and our dexterity, plus another 5d8. That's another 33.5. Then we'll do a Booming Blade, so another d6 plus another 8 plus another 3d8 from primary Booming Blade damage, and another 4d8 divided by 2 for secondary Booming Blade damage, and another 5d8 from Angelic Weapons again, and that's another 55.5 damage. That's 119.5 points of damage around. Plus 12 to hit means we're likely going to hit. If we count for chance to hit, we're talking about 82 points of damage per round. That's over double the baseline, and that's about double what I would expect to do with Tensor's Transformation. Never mind, our armor class here is 19, but we can use Bladesong in Planetar form. That's going to give us a 24 armor class, and we can cast Shield, and that gives us a 29 armor class. And we have a Healing Touch we can use 4 times a day for 30 hit points worth of healing. Also removes curses, disease, poison, blindness, and deafness. 4 times a day. That's about 120 hit points of healing, plus that other stuff. We're going to have 200 hit points. How about 120-foot fly speed? True Sight, 120 feet. We're immune to Charmed, Exhaustion, and Frightened. Damage resistances to Radiant, Bludgeoning, Piercing, and Slashing. We have additional spells we can cast that won't use up our spell slots. And, you know, if we get tired of this form, we can just change it using our action. Maybe we change into this. This is a Merilith. Once again, creature we can absolutely shape change into. How many attacks does it get around? It gets 7 attacks around. Can we Blade Song? Absolutely. And if we Blade Song in Merilith form, we're adding 5 damage to all 7 of those attacks. They are all melee weapon attacks. That's what's required in order to get Song of Victory. So yeah, even the tail gets the plus 5. So in this case, I'd absolutely use the multi-attack, and then I'd get the 2d8 plus 4, but it's actually plus 9 6 times, and then 2d10 plus 9. We also get a teleport we can do with our action. We actually get the reaction of the parry, but I would never do that because we can cast Shield. And you know how I talked before about being careful with your reactions? With a Merilith, you don't need to be protective of your reactions because you have reactive. You can take 1 reaction on every turn in a combat. That means you could cast Counterspell many times. You can cast Shield. Shield, of course, you only need to cast once. We're immune to poison, the poison condition. We still have True Sight 120 feet. Can't seem to get rid of True Sight. Damage resistances to cold, fire, lightning, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Oh, and when we hit with the tail, we grapple and restrain the creature. Now the damage, well, it really depends. If we assume that we're attacking with the tail last, then it's, 18 times 6 attacks, about 50% chance to hit. That's about 54 plus another 8 from the tail. So about 65 damage per round. That is significantly less than the Planetar, but significantly more than Tenser's Transformation. And if we attack with the tail first, and we succeed on grappling and restraining the target, so all the rest of the longswords are done with advantage, then we can get to close to the damage of the Planetar, little over 80 per round. So I want to call back to the beginning of this video when I talked about that comment I had that what if you want to play a Bladesinger that embodies the concept of a melee character that mixes in spellcasting? What would I do then? And here's my challenge for you. Find any build online that uses Bladesinger in a multi-class that gets to level 17. I've seen this. They'll go right to level 20, and they've multi-classed their Bladesinger so that they can't access 9th level spells in order to concentrate on doing melee damage. Here's my challenge to you is look at any of those builds and compare it to what we can achieve with a shape change spell, and I'm confident that we will find that over and over and over again that the wizard that went straight Bladesinger is going to be better at doing that, in addition to the many other things we're now better at. So when we're talking about Bladesinger, at levels 2 through 6, going into melee, just fine. Just use Shadowblade. Up to level 10, you can still use Shadowblade. It's still okay. Once we move beyond that, we have things like Draconic Transformation that can still make us effective in melee. So we are never at a point where we can't do that. But at level 17, it becomes so powerful to do that I can't justify taking any multi-classing with a Bladesinger, at least until we achieve level 17. So yeah, take Shape Change. And the thing is if you don't want to go into melee, Shape Change is still a good spell. I have a whole video about Shape Change because there are so many different things you can do with it. Now, I don't want to give you the wrong impression here. Bladesingers absolutely can go into melee. They can be reasonably effective. But spells are scaling exponentially in power. So I don't necessarily think going into melee is necessarily the best option once we get to a certain level. When we get to higher levels, there's always going to be some better option than going into melee. I just want to make it clear that you can do that if that's what you want to do. But again, the most effective things wizards can do are spells, and usually there's some kind of spell that could be even more effective than going into melee. So I don't want to give you the wrong impression that that's your go-to option. But if that's what you want to do, if that's the concept you want to fulfill, you can do it and still be reasonably effective by going straight wizard and using this build. Once you have 17 levels of wizard, you have the best things wizard is going to give you. There's nothing it's going to give you from levels 18 to 20 that's nearly as effective as what it gave you at level 17. So yeah, go for it. Or if you want to multi-class into, I don't know, your 3 levels of artificer, so you can take battlesmith and then you can, use your intelligence for your attack rolls. Yeah, go for it. Or you can just go 3 more levels of wizard. If you do, I think you'll be just fine. You get an additional high level slot for doing it, and we're going to be able to cast a 1st and 2nd level spell for free. We're going to get a couple 3rd level spells that become free preparations that we can cast once per day. And we're going to get additional ability score increase. Maybe we increase, I don't know, our dexterity. Maybe we take the alert feat. So there's a lot of different things you could do at this point, and none of them are necessary. Now you can kind of just go to your personal taste. But at 17th level, if you've done anything else, then go straight Bladesinger Wizard. You are going to be less powerful. That's just the way it is, including if you like your Bladesinger to go into melee. So that's the Bladesinger. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.